This is test 10, and we're talking about the 5R55N and 5R44E transmissions. Now, does anybody know which transmission is in our little brown Ranger out here?
Yeah, 55N.
No, that's a 4R44E.
I was just gonna say that, you didn't give me
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't give you time. Okay, well, whatever. When the battery is disconnected or a new battery is installed, the transmission must relearn its shift adaptive pressure control strategy. But what symptoms may emerge as a result?
Firm shift.
Firm shift. Is a firm shift a bad thing?
No, it's a good
I really like for a firm shift because I know that thing's biting those clutches good and hard and it's not going to be slipping them and burning them up. What is the recommended fluid change interval for the 5R55N transmission under normal, not severe driving conditions?
None.
What are you talking about?
That's what it
That's
says.
seriously the answer.
It's fill for life. This sounds like a Mercedes because they do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's actually really true.
They really do. But what if it leaks? Are they saying, now, what is it? Is there anything you can do that would make the transmission fluid need to be changed when you ordinarily might not have to?
Drive crazy all
Huh?
the time, probably.
Not crazy, but pulling heavy loads.
Towing.
How about just getting
Towing heavy loads causes the transmission to get hot. It changes the qualities of it. It gets all gummy and sticky. It just turns into a different kind of
How
fluid.
about just like flooring it every time you get in the car? It doesn't hurt.
That doesn't usually bother anything. You can do that all you want to. No be a problem. Only thing that does is mess up your tires and a whole bunch of other stuff and get a lot of tickets and you could
Yeah.
crash and burn. But as far as the transmission fluid, oh, no better.
Other than that,
Right.
you're good.
Yeah, it's, you know. Now I did know if somebody floors it and then puts it in gear while it's floored, yeah, this is a problem. You know, because it rips things all to shreds when you do that. But, when should the bench fill plug on the 5R55N transmission be used?
When it's serviced.
Only when filling it on the bench. That's not hard, okay? All right. On which transmission and under what circumstances would you use the go, no-go gauge?
R70W.
Yeah, that's on the 1998 through current model year 4R70W transmissions to determine if the solenoid connections on the lead frame have opened up. Okay, that's pretty smooth. Do you know what a go, no-go gauge is? You guys are laughing about that, huh? Something happened while I wasn't in here.
Military's laughing
Huh?
around.
What?
When you're doing the headspace and timing on a 50 cal, you use a go no go gauge.
There you go. And I'll tell you something else. When I was adjusting the valves on those diesel and well gas and diesel rabbits that I worked on at the dealership, you used a go no go gauge. And basically you stick it in there and it's supposed to be snug on the first part and it's stepped up to a thicker gauge, and when it hits that valve, it shouldn't go on in there, it should stop right there. So basically you're looking for a window. You want it to be,
Never heard of it till now.
huh?
Never heard of it till now.
Oh yeah, well that's not too terribly surprising because you're a very young man. Okay, all right. All right. I had one guy in here one time that was about 20 years old, and when I came up with something, he would say, "I never heard of that," and we're trying to invalidate it because he never heard of it. That's why you're 20 years old and you never heard of it. Okay, well, you know, I mean, you know, he had had some success doing mechanic work, and he thought there was nothing he didn't know, you know, basically. So, if there, do you know anybody like that? Somebody has fixed a few things. I used to say the guy at the Chevrolet dealership was telling me that he would get people that had managed to cram a 350 together in their backyard and get it started, and they thought they were ready for the floor of the dealership.
Oh my goodness.
That's just funny. Okay, which vehicle/engine platforms use the 5R44E transmission?
Ranger with a 2.3 or a 3.0.
Ranger with a 2.3 or a 3.0. What's our Ranger got? Yeah, but we don't have that particular transmission in ours. Okay, which engine platforms use the 5R55E transmission?
Ranger with a 4.0 or Sport or Sport Track with a 4.0.
Yeah, you know what a Sport Track is, right? What's a Sport Track?
I trust.
It's kind of like a hatchback Explorer.
What's the difference between, yeah, sort of, but it's not in, it doesn't have a separate bed. It's all part of the same body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of like a Subaru Brat or something, I guess. I don't know. But,
Yeah.
on the 5R54E, 5R55E, changes that cause shift adaptive pressure control strategy to revert to pre-adaptive levels and possibly cause a shift field concern include what?
Loss of power, PCM changing programs and replacement of PCM.
Yeah, anytime the anytime the PM has lost its keep alive power. And I will tell you, let me just briefly say this: there was a Chrysler of some vintage, and I can't remember what it was. It was out here, and may have been a LeBaron. It would drive, and it would just quit. May have been a New Yorker, and I don't remember the year model, but it would just quit shifting like it was supposed to. And if you switched it off and restarted it, it would start working right again. You know, it had an electronic transmission, and so I called the salvage yard over there and talked to Johnny, and I said, Johnny, you got a transmission controller for, you know, such and such a Chrysler, you know? And he left a little bit and came back on the phone. I got one of those for $25. So he brought it over here. We popped it on, and they never had that trouble again. You know, but when you're having to reboot the computer has either seen something wrong enough to where it wanted to go into limp-in mode, like on Michelle's car, this gray 500. It was giving issues with, it would turn on that wrench light on the dash and she would only have about half throttle. And the reason it turned out that she was having that problem was the wires harness from the engine controller was rubbing against part of the frame, and it was shorting out some of the wires from the accelerator pedal position sensor. And when it realized it couldn't trust those to protect her from running away, it would lock the throttle at where it wouldn't go over about half throttle. But she could switch it off and start it when the harness was move over against her when she was driving. She could switch it off and restart it, and it would drop out of that mode and go back into normal mode again. Sometimes, if it's got a wire harness short, it will put it into a mode like that will be rebooted, that you can reboot out of. Something else that I've seen, it's a lot of this Chrysler stuff too, is for all kinds of different problems. You know, you take the battery cables off, touch the two battery cables together, put them back on the battery, and a lot of the times speedometers, door locks, power windows, all kinds of stuff will come back in line.
And somebody told me that if you did that on their Jeep Comanche or something like that, you'd fry the PCM.
You won't fry the PCM if you pull the cables off and touch them together. That's hogwash.
Is it just
Because you're not hooking the battery. You're totally just.
The PCM has an internal battery.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but why in the world would you fry the PCM? I mean, if that's the case, then it's probably not going to last any time anyway. You know, I'm afraid of somebody telling me that. But I do know some of the Jeep radios, when you pull the battery cables off and put them back on, they don't lose the stations. But I don't know if it's because they're not, written in a non-volatile memory or what. Huh?
Is it more just like a tap, or is it more just like a...
Well, I always usually touch them together. But they also have a reflash that's supposed to keep that thing from losing that. The body computer is sometimes on that. But if I've got an issue like that, if somebody says that, so you will fry the PCM. Sometimes people will disconnect the battery when they're going to weld on the frame, like body shop people, and they'll destroy the engine controller because of that welding current going. If they got a ground over here on one end of the vehicle and they're welding on the other end, it's going to find ways to get into those electronics and ruin them. The smartest thing to do, if you're going to do something like that, is put your ground clamp right there by where you're welding, and or disconnect the engine controller wire harness from it. But you're not typically going to have a problem if you put your clip on the same piece you're welding. That's the whole deal there. That's David Leroy Broner. Hello, David. What's up with your bad self and everything? Broke down?
Uh-oh. Bring it up. Still get them.
Huh.
I'm on the hook.
Oh, well, we need to do something about that. We could put a radiator, I imagine, in. That shouldn't be a problem. I got a guy do an engine repair. I'll make him take care of it. Get it over here and we'll see what we can do with it. Alrighty. Okay, we got a charger that's got a radiator. Fan come off, went through the radiator.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's pretty smooth. Let's see. Where was I at? Oh, whenever. Incident. Why do we need shift adaptive pressure control? That's what I was going to ask earlier before I got into all that other hogwash.
Is it more of like for a smooth shift?
No, it's basically so it will learn how you drive. It wants to know how you drive, so it will know how to shift in the optimum. And it's doing all kinds of stuff you don't even know about behind the scenes. And it's saying, okay, we're shifting a little firm there. We need to drop back on the pressure when this guy gets to this particular point and all that. And if if she's driving it, and she's driving it the way she usually drive it, of course, you know, she burns the tires every time she takes off and all that kind of stuff.
Every time.
And then he drives it, and he's used to driving a motorcycle, and he drives real gentle and slow. Then basically, he's going to get in there, and he's going to be driving a different way, and it's going to feel different when he's driving it than it is when she's driving it because of the adaptive shift strategy. That's what adaptive is all about. It's learning things, right? Okay.
Until you change the battery and it forgets everything.
Yeah, and then it has to start over. It's kind of like your throttle. On some of these vehicles, when you change the battery, they won't idle anymore. You know this kind of nonsense going on. Okay. Let me see. If the 5R 55N transmission is out of the vehicle for service, what filling procedure should be performed before installing the transmission in the vehicle? Anybody know?
Use a pressurized gun.
What'd you say?
Use a pressurized gun and fill the train up to 9 quarts.
9 quarts.
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-fill the torque converter with 1 quart of Mercon. Yep, Mercon 5. Remove the transmission extension housing bench field plug. Use the pressurized gun and fill it with 9 quarts of Mercon 5 ATF. After the transmission is installed, check and add additional fluid using the fluid level checking procedure that was prescribed or described previously in your handout. Okay, now finally, normal resistance readings for the new 4R70W output shaft sensor are
1026 to 1194.
1026 to 1194. Is that particularly critical? How many of you remember the Chrysler Crossfire we had, that the yellow one, and that somebody used a heat gun to melt a brand new speed sensor? All right, so basically, what now I want to get at is, we drive down the road and the speed sensor would get hot and it would open up and it would die. So we pulled a code on that one, and it's a crank sensor. Huh?
It was the crank sensor, not the speed sensor.
I meant to say, well, crank speed sensor, how about
Sure you
that?
did.
Okay, so I put that thing in a vise and I hooked the meter up to it, and it was reading 1050. 1050. All right, so then I get a heat gun, and I don't hold it too close to the sensor because it will melt the plastic if you do.
Yes, yes.
And it
yes.
opened up. And I moved the thing off and it came back together.
It's almost like you just need to.
I said, this, hey man, this actually does the, this is it. This is the problem. So we get another one and it's reading 1,350 ohms from the parts store, and it's $100. And so put it on there and it might start and it might not. Got another one, it was reading 1,280 ohms or something like that. So I says, let's just go on Amazon. So we went on Amazon and we bought a original equipment crank sensor for a 2005 Chrysler Crossfire for $35.
Was it a Bosch?
The Bosch, it was the Bosch, and we got it, and I got it, and I measured it was 1050. Perfect. You see? All right. So here's the deal. When you measure that, if it's too high or too low, even if you get a replacement sensor, suspect that as a problem, particularly if it's something critical. Okay, that's pretty well got you taken care of.
failure?
Huh?
In-range failure?
Well, I don't know if I'd call that an in-range failure. I just call it a sensor that's got too much resistance, and that's going to cause your voltage to be in-range failure. Would be like on a sensor that's supposed to change, you know, like a coolant sensor or something like that.